Instructor Kale stood at the front of the bright white room. His body was covered in a hard, gray shell that clicked when he moved. He looked at the students. They were not all the same. They came from different stars. There was a big Gron named Taesuk. His arms were as thick as tree trunks. There was a slender illusion named Hygiene. Her skin seemed to shift like fog. There were two Tari, a male named June and a female named Sumin. They had sharp spines on their backs. And there was one human. His name was Lee Jiho. He looked ordinary. He had black hair and calm eyes. The room was a lecture hall at the Galactic Concordance Officer School. It was a place for training future leaders. The walls were smooth. The desks and chairs were bolted to the floor. A large view screen was dark on one wall. Everything was clean and quiet. Instructor Kale's voice came from a speaker on his chest. It was flat and clear. "Today you will be tested," he said. His many-faceted eyes did not blink. "This test is not about your normal weapons. It is not about your ships or your lasers. It is about your mind. It is about seeing what is in front of you." He paused. The clicking of his shell was the only sound. "Your task is simple. You must make a weapon. You must make it from this room. You can use only what is here. You have 1 hour. Your goal is to hit the target. Show me your understanding of tool and force." The other students moved at once. They knew what to do. Their bodies were made for different things. Their minds worked in ways Jiho could only guess. Taesuk the Gron walked to the wall. He put his big hands under a long, thin beam of metal. This beam was part of the wall's frame. It was not meant to be removed.
Taeseok grunted.
His muscles swelled. The metal creaked. With a loud groan, he bent the beam and pulled it free. It was as long as he was tall. He held it like a club. Then he began to twist one end, using his powerful fingers to shape it into a hammerhead. He worked with pure strength. Hygiene, the illusion, moved to the large view screen. She did not touch it with her hands. Instead, she held her pale fingers near the screen's surface. A soft hum filled the air. The screen began to vibrate. A web of cracks appeared on the black surface. It made a sound like breaking ice. Then, a large, sharp piece of crystal-like material broke loose and floated into her waiting hand. It glowed with a faint blue light. She was making a blade from the screen's broken pieces. The Tari, June, and Sumin worked together. They used the sharp spines on their forearms. They began to cut sections from the polymer chairs. The material was tough, but their spines were harder. They cut long, straight pieces. They were talking in low, quick clicks. It seemed they were making some kind of launcher, a weapon that would throw the sharp pieces they were cutting. Jiho did not move at first. He stood by his desk. He looked around. He saw the others using their natural gifts. He saw the Gron's strength. He saw the illusion's control over vibration. He saw the Tari's natural cutting tools. He had none of that. He was just a human. His hands were empty. His mind was full. He looked at his own chair. He looked at the desk bolted in front of him. He saw the thin, strong wires that connected the data ports. He saw the bolts holding everything together. He did not see weapons. He saw parts. He saw possibilities. Sumin, the Tari female, came over to him. Her movements were quick and bird-like. "Jiho," she said. Her voice was friendly but worried. "What is your plan? Humans are good at this, yes? Thinking of new things." Jiho gave a small smile. It was not a happy smile. It was a thinking smile. "I am still looking," he said. Across the room, Instructor Kale walked. He watched each student. He stopped by Taesuk and gave a single, slow nod. The Gron's hammer was taking shape. It was a brutal, simple weapon. Kale approved. He passed Hygiene. Her crystal shard was now a long, pointed spike. It floated above her palm. He nodded again. This was elegant power. Then Kale came to Jiho. The human was still just looking at a chair leg. He had not broken anything. He had not taken anything apart. "Innovation requires action, Cadet Lee," Kale said. His speaker voice was cold. "Observation alone is failure. Your species' file speaks of creativity. I see only hesitation." Jiho looked up at the instructor. The Vorthan's face was unreadable, a mask of polished shell. Understanding the material is the first step, sir, Jiho said. His voice was quiet but clear. Your time is passing, Kale said. He turned and walked away. The clicks of his legs were like a clock counting down. Jiho ignored the pressure. He closed his eyes for a moment. He was not seeing the White Room. He was seeing a small, cluttered workshop by the sea. He was smelling old wood and salt air. He was hearing his grandfather's voice. Jihoya, the old man said. This is a well. About. It is not just wood and string. It is a question. The question is, how do you send your will straight to the heart of the target? The answer is not in your arm. It is here. He had tapped his temple. And here. He had tapped his chest. Over his heart. Jiho opened his eyes. He looked at the chair leg again. He pushed on it. It bent. It was springy. It wanted to return to its shape. That was potential energy. That was power waiting to be used. He looked at the data cable under his desk. It was a bundle of thin, strong fibers. It could be a string. He looked at the bolts holding the desk together. If he loosened them, he could create a flexible joint. He could make a place for the springy chair leg to attach. A plan, simple and clear, formed in his mind. He would not make a hammer or a blade. He would make a bow. A real one. From a classroom chair and a data cable. He took the buckle from his uniform belt. It had a strong, thin edge. He knelt and began to work on the bolt under the desk. He did not remove it. He just loosened it. He worked slowly and carefully. He did not have ground strength or tarry spines. He had patience. Sumin watched him from her workstation. Her head tilted. She did not understand. He was not building a weapon. He seemed to be fixing the furniture. Jiho knew they were all watching. He knew they thought he was failing. But his hands did not shake. His grandfather's voice was in his ear. Find the arrow's path when you cannot afford the cannon. He was just making do. And in this room of strange aliens and advanced technology, making do was the most human thing of all. The sound in the room was the sound of work. Taesuk grunted as he slammed his new hammerhead against the floor to shape it flat. The bang was loud and solid. Hygiene's hum was a soft, constant note in the air as more crystal shards broke free and spun around her. The Tari pair, June and Sumin, snipped and cut with quick, precise motions. Only Lee Jiho worked in silence. He had finally removed the bolt from the joint under the desk. He held the small piece of metal in his palm for a moment. It was just a fastener. But to him, it was the first piece of his puzzle. He set it carefully on the desk's smooth surface. He turned his attention to the chair. It was a simple design. A curved back support and 4 legs made of that springy, dark polymer. He needed one of the longer curved pieces. He couldn't break it off. He didn't have the strength. So he used his belt buckle again on the smaller bolts that held the chair together. It was slow work. His fingers began to ache from the pressure. Sumin finished attaching a long, sharp polymer rod to a launch mechanism made from chair hinges. She looked over at Jiho again. She felt a strange need to help him. He was so quiet. He was so far behind. She walked over, her steps light on the floor. Jiho, she whispered. You need help. I can cut that for you. One quick slice. She raised her forearm, showing the sharp, natural-spined. Jiho paused and looked up at her. He saw real concern in her large, dark eyes. The other Tari, June, watched from a distance and shook his head. He thought Sumin was wasting time. Thank you, Sumin, Jiho said. His voice was warm. But I need it to be whole. Nokats. The strength is in the curve. If you cut it, the strength might break. Sumin tilted her head, confused. Strength? That thin piece of chair? It will snap if you bend it. That's the idea, Jiho said. He went back to work on the bolts. It needs to snap back. Sumin did not understand. But she nodded and went back to her own station. She decided to watch him while she worked. There was something about his calm focus that was different from the others. It wasn't frantic. It was patient, like water wearing down stone. Instructor Kale made another round of the room. He inspected each project. He stopped at Taesuk Station. The Gran was almost done. He had wrapped the handle of his hammer with strips of fabric torn from his own uniform padding. The hammerhead was a rough, brutal lump of metal. Direct, efficient, Kale stated. You understand force. Taesuk smiled, a wide grin that showed many teeth. Force is all you need, Instructor. Kale moved to hygiene. Her collection of floating crystal shards now swirled around her like a slow-moving storm. With a flick of her wrist, 3 of them shot forward in a straight line and embedded themselves in the wall with a chink-chink-chink sound. They formed a perfect triangle. Control. Precision from distance, Kale said. This was also good. He passed the Tari. Their launcher was a complex bundle of chair parts and tension wires. It looked like a small crossbow. Kale did not comment, but he looked at it for a long time. It was clever. It used the principles of the room well. Finally, he came to Jiho. The human had finally freed the long, curved piece from the chair. He had also pulled a long data cable from a port in the floor. He was now braiding 3 cables together, twisting them into a single, thicker string. On his desk lay the curved polymer limb and the loosened desk joint. Kale looked at the collection. Still looked like junk. Broken furniture and wires. Explain your progress, cadet, Kale said. His voice was flat. Jiho held up the braided cable. This will be the string, sir. It is very strong. It doesn't stretch. And that. Kale pointed at the curved chair piece. The bow's limb. It stores the energy when I pull the string back. Kale's shell clicked twice. It was a sound of disbelief. You are attempting to recreate a primitive projectile system. This is a test of adaptation, not archaeology. The bow was obsolete on your world centuries before you reached the stars. Jiho kept braiding the cable. His fingers moved steadily. Yes, sir. But the principle isn't obsolete. Transferring energy from the user through a spring to a light projectile. It is simple physics. These materials are good for it. The polymer is flexible. The cable is strong. It is what the room provides. It provides much more, Kale said, gesturing to the metal beam Taesuk had used. You chose the weakest components. I chose the right components for the tool I am making, Jiho said. He did not look up. He was focusing on his knot. A bow made from that beam would be too heavy to draw. It would fail. This, he held up the polymer limb, will work. Instructor Kale stared at him. The human's logic was irritating. It was like a quiet sound you couldn't ignore. He was not defiant. He was just sure. Kale had never seen a cadet so sure of something so silly. Continue, Kale said finally. It was not encouragement. It was an order to finish his inevitable failure. He walked away. His clicks sharp on the floor. Jiho let out a slow breath. He hadn't realized he was holding it. He attached the braided cable to one end of the polymer limb, tying a secure knot his grandfather had taught him. It was called a timber hitch. It held tight under tension. He then fitted the other end of the limb into the loose joint on the desk. The desk became his temporary workbench, holding the bow steady while he attached the other end of the string. He pulled on it slightly. The polymer limb bent. It groaned a little, but it bent. And when he let go, it sprang back straight. A small, real smile touched his lips for the first time. It worked. The basic idea worked. He looked around the room. The hour was half gone. The others had finished or nearly finished their powerful, scary-looking weapons. His was just a piece of a chair, tied to a desk with a string. But it was a bow, and he knew in his hands it would be enough. Time was moving forward. The sounds of construction filled the white room. The Gran Taesuk was now testing his hammer. He swung it in short, powerful arcs. Each swing made a deep whoosh of air. The hammerhead, made from the wall beam, was a solid block of metal. He had found some loose wiring and wrapped it around the handle for a better grip. He looked pleased with his work. Hygiene, the illusion, had several sharp pieces of crystal floating around her now. They moved in a slow, beautiful dance above her open palms. She was not just making a weapon. She was making art. But it was deadly art. The points of the crystals were as sharp as needles. The Tari, Jun, and Sumin were almost finished. They had built a stand from chair legs. On this stand sat a small, clever machine. It used the strong springs from inside the seats. A polymer rod was loaded into a groove. A trigger mechanism was made from a bent piece of metal. It was a small crossbow. It looked efficient and dangerous. Only Lee Jiho's station looked like a messy workshop. On his desk lay the curved polymer limb from the chair. Next to it was the braided data cable, now a strong string. He was working on the desk itself. He had completely loosened a metal joint where one leg met the underside of the desktop. This joint was his key. His idea was simple but strange. He would not hold the bow in his hand like a normal weapon. The desk would be part of it. The desk was bolted to the floor. It would not move. This would give him a stable platform. The flexible chair leg would attach to this solid base. It was an unusual plan. He fit the end of the polymer limb into the loose desk joint. It was not a perfect fit. He used thin strips of material, torn from the hem of his own uniform, to pad the connection. He wrapped the strips tight. Then he used more of the thin wiring to bind it all together. It was not pretty. It looked like a bundle of junk. Sumin came over again. She could not help it. She was too curious. She saw the bundle attached to the desk. "I do not understand," she said, her voice a whisper. "Is the desk your weapon?" "In a way," Jiho said. He did not look up from his work. His fingers were tying a complex knot. "The desk is the foundation. It is the anchor. It lets the bow be more stable. More accurate." "Accurate?" Sumin looked at the crooked bundle of polymer and wire. "How can that be accurate?" "You will see," Jiho said. His voice was calm. He believed in his project. This belief was quiet but solid. Like a stone in a stream, he finished securing the limb to the desk. Now he had a flexible arm sticking out from under the desk. He picked up the braided cable string. He tied one end to the tip of the polymer limb. He pulled on it. The limb bent. It was a good bend, smooth and deep. He tied the other end of the string to the desk leg. Creating tension, he now had a crude bow fixed to the furniture. He plucked the string. It made a low, dull twang. It was the right sound. He needed arrows. He looked at the remaining chair parts. He selected a few straight, thin support rods. They were about as long as his arm. He took one and rubbed its tip against the rough, textured floor. He rubbed it back and forth, back and forth. It was slow work. He was not cutting it. He was grinding it to a point. Took many minutes. The room was filled with the soft, scratching sound. Taesuk noticed the sound. He stopped his hammer swings. He watched Jiho rubbing the stick on the floor. A deep laugh rolled out of him. "What is this?" he called out. His voice loud and friendly but also mocking. "Is the human making a campfire? Are we going to roast meat?" Some of the other cadets smiled. Even Hygiene glanced over, a faint look of amusement on her face. Jiho did not answer. He kept rubbing. He focused on the tip of the rod. He turned it to make the point even. He did not let the laughter touch him. He was in his grandfather's workshop again. He was a boy, smoothing a piece of wood with sandpaper. The old man's words were in his ear. "Do not hurry the work. Let the work become true." Instructor Kale made his rounds again. He observed each project with his unreadable eyes. He saw Taesuk's powerful hammer. He saw Hygiene's floating crystals. He saw the Tari's neat launcher. These were all good. They were logical. Then he came to Jiho. The human was now testing his creation. He had fitted a pointed rod to the string. He was pulling the string back, bending the polymer limb. He was aiming at the blank wall across the room. He was not firing. He was testing the feel. He was measuring the draw. Kale watched for a full minute. Jiho was completely focused. He pulled the string back to the same spot near his jaw every time. He held it. He aimed. Then he slowly let the tension go. "Your device lacks power," Kale stated flatly. "The projectile mass is low. The launch force is limited by your biology. It is an inefficient system." Jiho lowered the bow. He looked at the instructor. "Sir, with respect, Efficiency is about using the right amount of energy for the job. Not the most energy. This has enough power to reach the target. That is all the job requires. And if the target is armored? Kale asked. Then you do not shoot at the armor, Jiho said simply. You find the gap. You aim for the eye, the joint, the weak point. This, he held up the pointed rod, does not need to break a wall. It just needs to find the one spot that matters. Kale's shell clicked. The answer was illogical. It was not about overwhelming force. It was about precision and choice. It was a tactical answer, not an engineering one. It was not what he expected. He did not say if it was good or bad. He simply moved on. But Sumin had heard. Find the gap. The words stayed with her. She looked at her own clever launcher. It was designed to hit hard and true. It was not designed to find a gap. It was a different way of thinking. Jiho went back to work. He sharpened 2 more rods. He now had 3 arrows. The bow was ready. He sat back for a moment and looked at his creation. It was ugly. It was made from broken furniture. But in his eyes it was complete. It was a tool that would do exactly what he asked of it. No more, no less. He looked at the clock. There were only a few minutes left. Around him, the others were putting final touches on their powerful, impressive weapons. He was sitting next to a desk with a piece of chair tied to it. He was not worried. He was ready. The lecture hall was no longer quiet. It was filled with the low hum of anticipation and the clatter of final adjustments. The hour was nearly up. The other cadets had finished their weapons. Now they held them or stood beside them, with a look of hard pride. They were all looking at Lee Jiho. Taesuk the Grand stood like a mountain. His kinetic hammer rested on his shoulder. It was a massive, intimidating thing. A power cell taken from a wall panel was wired crudely to its head. It gave off a low, threatening pulse of blue light. Each pulse made the air feel heavy. Hygiene the illusion stood with serene grace. 5 long, needle-like shards of the viewscreen crystal floated in a slow orbit around her body. They glowed with a soft, captured light. She did not need to hold them. They were an extension of her will. The Tari, June, and Sumin stood behind their launcher. It was a clever, complex device made of chair legs and tension coils from the seat springs. It looked like a small, angry ballista. A rack of sharpened polymer rods was loaded and ready. Then there was Jiho. He stood next to his desk. His creation was finally assembled. It did not look like a weapon from the future. It looked like a project from a history lesson. The main body was the curved, dark polymer limb from the chair. It was fastened at one end to the bolted-down desk leg with wiring, creating a crude but stable handle. The other end flexed freely. Strung between them was the tight, braided cable. It was a bow, an unmistakable, ancient bow. He had also made 3 projectiles. They were straight pieces of a chair support rod. He had rubbed their tips against the rough floor for many minutes to sharpen them to a dull point. They were not pretty. They looked like sticks. A low sound rumbled through the room. It was Taesuk laughing. It was not a mean laugh, but a laugh of pure disbelief. Look at it, he boomed, pointing his free hand at Jiho. The human has made a toy. Does he think the target will be scared away by a piece of his chair? Hygiene did not laugh, but a faint, dismissive smile touched her lips. She glanced at the crude bow and then away, as if it were not worth the space in her vision. June, the male Tari, shook his head. A waste of time. He could have helped us. He has good hands for detail. Instead, he makes a thing for children. Only Sumin did not speak. She watched Jiho's face. He was not looking at the others. He was looking at his bow. He ran his fingers along the cable string, checking its tension. His expression was not one of shame or anger. It was one of focus. He was tuning an instrument. Instructor Kale's clicking steps silenced the room. He walked down the line, doing his final inspection before the trial. He paused at each station, giving a short, technical comment. He reached Taesuk. A brute force amplifier. Acceptable. He moved to hygiene. Precision field manipulation. Elegant. He looked at the Tari launcher. A logical adaptation of available mechanics. efficient. Finally, he stood before Jiho. The difference was absurd. On one side of the room, weapons hummed with energy and gleamed with sharp edges. Here, there was only bent furniture and string. Kale's many eyes looked from the bow to Jiho's face. Cadet Lee, you will now explain your weapon to the evaluation panel. His tone made it clear he was the only panel that mattered. Jiho stood straight. He picked up the bow. It looked even stranger in his hands. Sir, this is a tension-powered projectile launcher. A recurve bow. The polymer limb stores elastic potential energy when the string is drawn. This energy transfers to the projectile upon release, propelling it forward. He spoke the words cleanly, like he was reading from a manual. But they sounded silly next to the physical object. It is a bow, Kale stated, his translator voice utterly flat. Yes, sir. You have seen the other solutions. You have access to the same environment. Explain your choice to replicate a primitive tool. Jiho took a slow breath. He could feel everyone staring at him. Sir, the evaluation parameters were to create a weapon from the environment. The goal is to hit the target. I analyzed the properties of the available materials. The polymer is flexible and has good memory. It wants to return to its shape. The data cables have high tensile strength with no stretch. These are ideal properties for a bow. I did not replicate an old tool. I used the materials to build the most effective launcher they could become. Effectiveness isn't proven, Kale shot back. The design is inherently limited by your own physical strength. Cannot compare to powered systems. It is not meant to compare, sir, Jiho said. His voice grew quieter, but no less certain. It is meant to solve the problem given. With these materials, a hammer would be too heavy to swing effectively. A power cell cannot be safely weaponized without proper regulators, which we do not have. My solution has no moving parts to break. It uses no energy except my own. It will not fail, and it will hit the target. Taesuk snorted again. If you can pull it back, little human. Jiho finally looked away from Kale. He looked at the big Gron. He did not look angry. He looked thoughtful. Then, without a word, he turned back to his desk. He picked up one of his sharpened rods. He fitted it to the string. He planted his feet, raised the bow, and drew the cable back in one smooth, strong motion. The polymer limb bent into a deep, trembling curve. The braided cable groaned but held. Jiho's back and shoulder muscles tightened under his uniform. He held the draw for 3 seconds, his aim steady on a blank wall, showing the control he had. Then, he slowly let the tension down, easing the bow back to rest. The room went completely silent. The display of quiet strength was more surprising than any hammer blow. He had drawn it fully, and he had done it with an athlete's control. He looked back at Instructor Kale. I can pull it back. Kale's shell clicked rapidly. The human had just demonstrated practical application and physical capability. The mockery in the room died. Now there was only a strange, waiting silence. The trial will prove it, Kale said finally. We proceed to the range. Prepare to move your devices. The group moved to the testing range next door. It was a long, plain room with a high ceiling. The air was cool and still. At the far end, a holographic target shimmered into existence. It was a simple silhouette, glowing a soft blue. It stood 50 meters away. In the center of its chest was a smaller, brighter circle. Near the top was an even smaller, representing a high-difficulty shot. Instructor Kale stood to the side, a datapad in his hand. The trial is simple. 1 projectile per cadet. You will engage the target from the marked line. Accuracy, force, and control will be measured.
Gron Cadet Taeseok.
You are first. Taesuk hefted his hammer. He walked to the firing line, a yellow mark on the floor. He did not need to get closer. He planted his feet wide, took a deep breath, and with a roar, swung the hammer in a huge overhand arc. He did not let it go. Instead, at the bottom of the swing, he triggered the power cell. A visible wave of force, a ripple of distorted air, shot out from the hammerhead. It traveled down the range like a small, silent explosion. It hit the holographic target. The effect was dramatic. The entire silhouette flickered and blurred violently, like a picture on a broken screen. The light warped and stretched. A deep, thunderous whump echoed in the room. The system chimed and a display lit up near Kale. High concussive force delivered. Target integrity simulation. Severe degradation. Accuracy low. Combat effectiveness high.
Taiseok grinned, satisfied.
He had smashed the problem. That was the Grand way. Illusion Cadet Hygiene. Kale called. Hygiene glided to the line. She selected one of her floating crystal shards. It was long and sharp as a needle. She held out her hand, palm toward the target. The shard oriented itself, pointing downrange. There was no wind-up, no sound. It simply shot forward. It moved faster than the eye could follow. There was a soft ping sound. The shard was now embedded, not in the wall, but in the exact center of the small, bright circle on the target's chest. Stuck there, vibrating slightly. The hologram flickered only where the shard had pierced it. The system chimed again. Projectile velocity, extreme. Accuracy, maximum. Penetration, high. Force efficiency, superior. Hygiene gave a slight, graceful nod. She had solved the problem with perfect, silent precision. Tari cadets, Kale said. June stepped forward. He aimed their complex launcher, which was resting on a tripod made of chair legs. He looked through a simple sight made of 2 bolts. He pulled a release lever. Thwack! The sharpened polymer rod shot out. It was fast and straight. It struck the target in the upper shoulder area. A good hit. The hologram flickered at the point of impact. The rod clattered to the floor beyond. Accuracy, good. Projectile force, adequate. System adaptability, notable. The system reported. June and Sumin exchanged a look of solid approval. Their machine had worked. Then all eyes turned. Instructor Kale looked at his pad. Then up.
Human Cadet Lieho.
Jiho picked up his bow. He picked up one of his 3 sharpened rods. He walked to the yellow line. The weapon looked more out of place than ever in this clean, technological room. The bow was a weird shape of dark plastic and woven wire. The arrow was just a stick. Taesuk folded his massive arms, a smirk on his face. June watched with detached curiosity. Hygiene observed, her expression unreadable. Sumin held her breath. Jiho planted his feet. He did not stand like a soldier. He stood with his side to the target, his left arm holding the bow out straight. He knocked the rod onto the string. It rested awkwardly against the desk leg handle. He took a deep, slow breath. His eyes on the faraway blue silhouette he began to draw. His right hand moved back in a straight line, past his jaw. His left arm pushed forward against the bow's grip. It was not a muscle pull from the arm. It was the whole body. His back muscles tightened. His shoulder blades came together. The polymer limb of the bow bent. It bent into a deep, smooth curve. The braided cable string grew taut and hummed with tension. He held it there. The bow was fully drawn. He was utterly still. He was not just holding a weapon. He was a part of it. The bow, the string, the arrow, and his body were one tense, waiting system. He was not looking at the target's chest. His gaze was fixed higher, on the small, bright dot near the top of the silhouette. The high difficulty point. There was no roar. No machine sound. Just the quiet strain of a human body and a piece of furniture holding a tremendous amount of potential energy. Then, he released. It was not a jerk. It was a clean, open relaxation of his fingers. Thwip. The sound was soft and sharp. The polymer limb snapped back to its shape. The string vibrated. The rod flew. It did not go in a laser straight line like Hygiene's crystal. It flew in a shallow, rising arc. It was not blindingly fast, but it had a graceful, deadly speed. For a second, it seemed to hang in the air, following the perfect curve of its path. No1 moved. Everyone watched the stick fly across the 50 meters. It did not hit the center mass. It did not hit the shoulder. The sharpened tip of the polymer rod struck the small, bright at the top of the holographic silhouette, the simulated head of the target with a solid thwack. The rod stuck there for a moment, embedded in the light, before the hologram system dislodged it and it fell to the floor. The silence was total. Then, the system chimed. Its voice sounded almost surprised. Projectile velocity, moderate. Kinetic force, low. Accuracy, maximum precision bonus awarded.
Calculated combat effectiveness, letal.
No one spoke. Taesuk's smirk had vanished. Hygiene's eyes were wide. June was staring at the target, then at the fallen rod, then at Jiho. Sumin let out her breath in a quiet, shocked puff. She had seen his focus, but she had not believed, not really, until she saw the arrow find its mark. Instructor Kale looked from his datapad to the target. He looked at the simple bow in Jiho's hands. He looked at the human's calm, unsurprised face. The clicks from his exoskeleton were slow and thoughtful. The test was over. The results were clear. But the lesson was just beginning. The silence in the testing range was heavy. The soft hum of the holographic projector was the only sound. The blue silhouette still glowed at the far end, the small dot where the rod had struck seeming brighter than before. Lee Jiho lowered his bow. He did not smile. He did not look at the others. He simply relaxed his stance and looked at the weapon in his hands. It had worked, just as he knew it would. The quiet confidence he had carried the whole time was now a solid fact in the room. Instructor Kale was the first to move. He looked down at his datapad. He looked up at the target. He looked back at the pad. The numbers were clear. The human had achieved the highest possible accuracy score. The system had given a lethal rating based on shot placement, not raw power. Kale's many eyes finally settled on Jiho. The clicks of his shell were slow and deliberate. "Cadet Lee," he said. His voice was not loud, but it cut through the quiet. "Explain." It was not a request for more technical details. It was a command for understanding. The other cadets were all staring. Taesuk's face was a mix of confusion and frustration. Hygiene's usual calm was broken by intense curiosity. June looked like he was trying to solve a difficult math problem. Sumin just watched, waiting. Jiho took a moment. He looked at the simple bow. "Sir, the task was to make a weapon from the room to hit the target." Everyone looked at the room and saw different things. They saw a metal beam for a hammer. They saw a crystal screen for a blade. They saw chair parts for a launcher. He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I saw properties. I saw the spring in the chair leg. I saw the strength in the cable. I saw the desk as a workbench and a stabilizer. I didn't see parts for a new weapon. I saw parts for a very old one, because the old one worked on principles that these parts could recreate." Taesuk shifted his weight. "But why?" he grumbled, the confusion clear in his deep voice. "My hammer would crush any target. Her crystal would cut through anything. Why make a weak stick thrower?" Jiho turned to face the big Gron. He was not afraid. He spoke plainly. "Your hammer makes a shockwave. It needs a power cell from the wall. Without the right regulator, that is dangerous. Could fail or even hurt you. And for a single, small target at this distance, most of its force is wasted in the air. It is a good weapon for a crowd or a wall, not for one precise shot." He looked at Hygiene. "Your crystal is perfect, but it needs your special mind to control it. I do not have that. I cannot use what I do not have." Finally, he looked at the Tari launcher. "Your device is clever. It uses springs and levers well, but it has many parts. Many parts can break or misfire. The bow has only 3 parts: the limb, the string, and the arrow. There is almost nothing to go wrong." He held up his bow again. "This uses what I do have. My own strength. My understanding of how to use it. The materials wanted to be this. They were good for this. So I listened to the materials." Sumin found her voice. It was a soft, wondering sound. "You didn't try to make a better weapon than ours. You made the only weapon the room would give to you." Jiho nodded at her. "Yes, that is it exactly. The test was not about bringing outside knowledge of plasma guns or lasers. It was about looking at a desk and a chair and seeing possibility. My possibility was different from yours. It was not better or worse. It was just mine. Instructor Kale took a step forward. His rigid face was unreadable, but his posture was different. Less like a judge, more like a student. And the shot? You aimed for the smallest point, not the center mass. Why? Because the task was to demonstrate the weapon, Jiho said. Any hit would have shown it worked. But hitting the most difficult point showed how well it worked. It showed control. It showed that the weapon and the person using it could choose exactly where to strike. True force is not about how much energy you use. It is about how little energy you can use and still finish the task. He looked down at his hands, remembering the old workshop by the sea. My grandfather taught me that. He made traditional bows. He said a warrior with a rifle can destroy a hill, but a hunter with a bow must understand the wind, the distance, and the heart of the animal. He must be part of the shot. The weapon is just the connection. He fell silent. The words hung in the air. Kale stood very still. He was processing. He had taught this test for many years. He had seen powerful weapons. He had seen clever ones. He had never seen a weapon that was also a lesson in philosophy. He had never seen a cadet so completely redefine the idea of adaptability. It was not adapting technology. It was adapting thought. The human had not fought against his limits. He had embraced them. He had found a path within them that no one else could see, because no one else had his history, his memory, his quiet mind. The evaluation, Kale announced, his speaker voice loud in the quiet room, is concluded. He looked at each cadet. You all succeeded. You all made functional tools. Grand Taesuk, overwhelming force. Illusion hygiene, perfect precision. Tari team, mechanical ingenuity. You understood the assignment. Then he looked at Jiho. Human Lee Jiho, you understood the purpose. You demonstrated that adaptability is not the mastery of technology, but the mastery of context. You saw the soul of the tool within the materials. Your score reflects this. He did not say the human had won, but he didn't have to. The stunned respect in the room was clear. The mockery was gone, replaced by a new, careful-looking. Taesuk looked at the crude bow with a grudging frown, no longer seeing a toy, but seeing the cleverness in its simplicity. Hygiene gave a slow, respectful nod towards Jiho. June was examining his own launcher, as if seeing its unnecessary complexity for the first time. Sumin just smiled. She had believed in his quiet way, and now everyone else saw it too. Instructor Kale's final clicks were soft. Dismissed. Return the materials to their original state. The group began to move, the spell broken. But the image of the flying stick, and the quiet human who had thrown it, would not leave them. It was a different kind of power. And in a universe of noise and energy, it was suddenly the most interesting thing any of them had seen. The walk back to the lecture hall was quiet. The air felt different now. Before, the other cadets had moved with the confidence of their creations. Now they carried a new kind of weight. It was the weight of a surprise they did not fully understand. Lee Jiho walked among them, his strange bow held loosely at his side. He did not look proud. He looked thoughtful, as if already moving on to the next task. Sumin walked a little closer to him than before. She kept glancing at the bow, then at his face. When they entered the White Room, Instructor Kale gave his final order. Restore the environment to its original condition. All materials returned. All fixtures secured. The others began to disassemble their weapons. Taesuk unwrapped the cloth from his hammer handle. He bent the metal beam back toward its slot in the wall, his great muscles straining to make it fit. He did not look at Jiho, but his movements were slower. Less sure than before, Hygiene guided her crystal shards back to the broken viewscreen. With a reverse hum, she fused them back into the surface. The cracks remained, a web of evidence, but the pieces were returned. Her elegant fingers traced the lines, a faint frown on her lips. June and Sumin carefully took apart their complex launcher. They unscrewed chair legs, uncoiled springs, and laid everything in a neat pile to be reassembled later. June worked in silence, his mind clearly elsewhere. Jiho went to his desk. He carefully unstrung the bow. He untied the braided cable from the polymer limb. He coiled the cable and placed it back into the data port in the floor, pushing it until it clicked home. He took the curved chair leg and examined the bolts. Using his belt buckle again, he began to fasten it back onto the chair frame, tightening each connection until it was firm and solid that he worked with the same quiet care he had used to build it. There was no hurry. There was no waste of movement. It was like watching a craftsman finish a piece of work, giving it the same respect at the end as he had at the beginning. Sumin finished her work and came over. She watched him secure the last bolt. "You are putting it back exactly as it was," she said. "It was not mine to keep," Jiho said, giving the bolt one final turn. "It was only mine to use for a little while." "That is a very different way to see things," she said softly. Instructor Kale moved through the room, inspecting. He checked the wall where the beam had been. He checked the view screen. He stopped at Jiho's desk and chair. He ran a hand over the joints. They were tight. He could find no sign of what had been created there, except perhaps for a few faint scuff marks on the floor where the rod tips had been sharpened. Kale looked at Jiho. The human cadet was standing again, his hands empty. The room was as it had been 1 hour before. Sterile. Ordered. But it was not the same. The room had been changed, not by what was taken, but by what had been shown. "Cadets," Kale said. His voice was not the dry, instructional drone from the start of the hour. It was lower, more considered. "You have completed the evaluation. Your scores are logged. You may go." The others began to file out. Tae-suk gave one last, long look at the chair Jiho had used, then shook his head and left. Hygiene glided past, her eyes meeting Jiho's for a brief second. It was not a smile, but it was an acknowledgement. June followed, still deep in thought. Sumin hesitated. "Your grandfather," she said to Jiho. "He would be proud." Jiho gave a small, genuine smile. "I think he would ask if I remembered to breathe correctly during the draw." Sumin did not understand the joke, but she smiled back anyway. Then she left. Jiho moved to follow, but Instructor Kale's voice stopped him. "Cadet Lee." "A moment." Jiho turned and stood at attention. "Sir." Kale looked at him. The clicking of his shell was almost silent. "Your file states your people are generalists. Adaptive. It is a simple word in a report. Today, I saw the meaning behind the word." He paused, choosing his next words with great care. "You did not see a room. You saw a forest. You did not see scrap. You saw resources. You did not see a test. You saw a hunt. This is a lens I had not considered. It is a profound form of sight."
Jiho stayed quiet, listening.
The concordance values specialization, the grand strength, the illusion control, the Tari cunning. These are easy to quantify. Your talent is not. It is the talent of context, of seeing the hidden tool. It is unpredictable. That makes it dangerous to an enemy and difficult for a teacher. Kale took a step closer. "Do not let this place," he said, gesturing to the clean, white room, "teach you to see only what is expected. The next test may not allow for a bow, but the thinking behind the bow, that is your weapon. That is what you must keep sharp." It was not praise. It was a warning and a lesson wrapped together. It was the highest form of respect Instructor Kale could offer. "I understand, sir," Jiho said. Kale gave a single, slow nod. "Dismissed." Jiho turned and walked out of the lecture hall. The corridor outside was empty. The others had gone ahead. He walked alone, his footsteps quiet on the polished floor. That he thought of his grandfather's workshop. He thought of the smell of wood and glue. He thought of the old bow on the wall, not as a relic but as a reminder that simplicity is a choice, that skill is a kind of truth, and that sometimes the most advanced thing you can do is something very, very old. That he did not have a weapon in his hands anymore. But he did not need one. He had remembered something far more important. He had remembered how to see. And in a vast galaxy of advanced technology and alien wonders, that simple human sight was the most powerful tool of all. He continued down the hall, a quiet figure in a uniform, already thinking of what the next room might provide.